existential evidence in life. Let me look at 4 outworkings that atheism has to live with. I cannot live with those outworkings. They're existentially unlivable. You see, if atheism is true, ultimately there is no moral law in this universe. And any moral pronouncement is either utilitarian, pragmatic, subjective, or emotive. There is no moral law reflective in this universe, and anything that deals with good and bad is purely the product of your environment and your culture. And let me unfold this argument and tell you how it works. Listen to the words of Nietzsche, the German philosopher who I think was one of the most honest thinkers of the past century. Listen to what he says in his Madman. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, "I'm looking for God, I'm looking for God." As many of those who did not believe in God were standing together there, he excited considerable laughter. "Have you lost him then?" said one. "Did he lose his way like a child?" said another. "Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage or emigrated?" Thus they shouted and laughed him to scorn. But the madman sprang into their midst and pierced them with his glances. "Where is God?" he cried. "I'll tell you, we have killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers." But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us a sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns, maybe? Are we not perpetually falling backwards and forwards, sidewards and in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not more and more night coming on us all the time? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? God's decomposed too, you know, and God is dead. He remains dead and we have killed him. Now, how shall we, the murderer of all murderers, compose ourselves? That which was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has ever possessed has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood from us? With what water can we purify ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games will we need to invent? Is not this the greatest of deeds, too great for us to handle? Must not we ourselves become God, simply to seem worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, you know, and whoever shall be born after us for the sake of this deed shall be part of a higher history than all history hitherto. Here the madman fell silent and again regarded his listeners. They too were silent, and they stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern to the ground, and it broke and went out. "I come too early. My time has not yet come. This tremendous event is still on its way, still traveling, and it has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds require time even after they have done before they can be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves." It has been related further that on the same day this madman entered diverse churches, and there sang a requiem, aeternam Deo. Led out and quieted, he is said to have retorted each time, "What are these churches now, if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of a dead God? We have killed him." Anytime I hear a man lambasting or criticizing religion for having caused bloodshed, it is a legitimate criticism, because it is unfortunate. But there is an answer to that. I won't go into the answer to that, but let me just say this. The same people often forget of the bloodshed that has been shed in the name of atheism. Stalin was an avowed atheist. He used to be a seminary student preparing for the ministry when he lost his belief in God and Lenin singularly selected Stalin because of his hatred of things religious. He read Nietzsche. Adolf Hitler personally presented a copy of Nietzsche's writings to Benito Mussolini. Hitler took Nietzsche's thinking and gave it a kind of a military interpretation. And we tend to forget that the most intelligent nation of the world at that time were the ones who designed the concentration camps, also sat enthralled before the music of Wagner for their entertainment. But Hitler took Nietzsche and translated it into his political theory. The Superman, getting it right out of Nietzsche's writings. But what Nietzsche is pointing out here is, which way are we going to turn? We have wiped away the horizon. Is there any up or down? How are we going to recognize what is right and what is wrong? You must understand, when Aldous Huxley was writing his book Ends and Means, a book that is really worth reading, Aldous Huxley said this: I wanted to believe the Darwinian idea. I chose to believe it, not because I think there was enormous evidence for it, nor because I believed it had the full authority to give interpretation to my origins, but he says in his book Ends and Means, I chose to believe it because it delivered me from trying to find meaning and freed me to my own erotic passions. You may also know that Karl Marx and Engels had read the Darwinian hypothesis. They wanted to dedicate one of the translations of it to Darwin, and Darwin declined the offer because atheistic economic theory saw some of its underpinnings in the essential definition of man in trying to break us away from any divine origins. There is a connection, and ideas do have consequences. There is no moral law to which we can reflect. Let me illustrate this in the classic illustration of the Holocaust. At the Nuremberg trials, there was a fascinating dialogue going on all the time on how these judges were going to defend themselves. And basically, the man defending them was in the sum and substance trying to argue for their protection by saying they were operating according to the law of their own land. Finally, in frustration, somebody said, but gentlemen, is there not a law above our laws? And the answer of Nietzsche would be no, there is no law above our laws. And if you examine the ramifications of this, you begin to see it in some enormous manifestations, particularly in the Western world today. One philosopher of ethics has put it this way: ours is an age where ethics has become obsolete. It is superseded by science. It is deleted by psychology, dismissed as emotive by philosophy. It is drowned in compassion and retreats before relativism. The usual moral distinctions between good and bad are simply drowned in a maudlin emotion in which we feel more sympathy for the murderer than for the murdered, for the adulterer than for the betrayed, and in which we have actually begun to believe that the real guilty party, the one who somehow caused it all, is the victim and not the perpetrator of the crime. It's a mouthful of a statement. Just look at the issues we have debated in the last month on national television. 1 month ago, a man was on trial across the world. He was on trial across the world for statements he allegedly made in private to somebody that propositioned a woman in crass and crude and certainly unglorifying terms. He was on trial nationally and internationally, and roundly condemned in many circles. 4 to 5 weeks later, we have another man with a self-avowed promiscuous lifestyle who ends up contracting an unfortunate result as it, and all of a sudden given hero's status. Tell me, is there some confusion going on here? How do we explain that to our teenagers? How do we give them a moral basis for decision making? And those who study these subjects deal with it, and there's a constant contradiction in the value systems. And I'll say this as kindly as I can. The last 22 years of my life have been spent in the West. The equal amount in the beginning was spent in the East. And Western civilization is being rocked at its foundations because Western man does not know the point of reference for the value system that he wants to espouse right now. See, the Middle East still espouses Islam. There's some transcendent leverage to the culture. The Far East or in India, they've still got some transcendent leverage to the culture. We in modern times are daring the lines in the West, and we actually think we can survive without the espousing of a moral law. History cries out against the experiment.